Tips from Trestle is brought to you by the Belter Companies, Navigator Group Purchasing, and eMenu Choice Point of Sale. Welcome to Tips from Trestle, the Senior Living Food and Hospitality Podcast. This podcast explores the senior living industry with a unique focus on food, hospitality, and the community experience. I'm your host, Aaron Fish. During 3 decades in the hospitality industry, I focused my work on creating exceptional experiences for the customers we serve. My goal for this podcast? Educate, inform, and inspire leaders in senior living. How? By creating hospitality with a purpose, by bringing the customer experience to the front of mind in our industry. We should bring the passionate spirit of food and hospitality to everything that we do and everyone we serve each and every day. So what are we waiting for? Let's get to it. Today on Tips from Trestle, I'm joined by Brian Lopp. Brian has been with Navigator Group Purchasing since March 2018 and is currently the Vice President of Operations. He has 26 years experience in the food industry, which includes operations, distribution, GPO, and government. He is responsible for multiple areas of the Navigator organization, including GPO operations, contracts, field implementation, and market baskets. Brian graduated from the New England Culinary Institute with a BA in Culinary Arts and Hospitality and Restaurant Management and currently lives in the Austin, Texas area. Brian, thanks for joining me today on Tips from Trestle.
Great. Thanks, Aaron. Great to be here.
So I like to start by getting everybody's backstory, right? Because obviously you're in group purchasing now, but I have a hunch, like most of us, that's not where it started. So I'd love to learn a little bit more about your background and how you got into the GPO world from a culinary arts degree.
Well, that's a great question, Aaron. I get asked that quite a bit. So way back in the Wayback Time Machine, I decided I wanted to go and do something that I liked to do, and that was basically cook. So I went to culinary school. One thing led to another. Ended up getting a chef job with a country club in the Austin area. Then worked with Marriott at a hotel conference center up in the DC area. So anyways, my love of cooking started. I was a very creative guy back in the day. And at some point, you know, the hours and the time of day, the time of week, you're always working when people are off, that kind of thing, starts to wear on you. And I was ready to start a family with my wife. And we have a one daughter now. But at the time, I wanted to kind of do something a little bit different. And so what happened is that the distributor I was working with actually recruited me to come and have a discussion with them and say, hey, what do you think? So one thing led to another, and I got into the distribution realm and sales in the DC area, and at that point, and from there I went off to go work for the federal government for USDA in the school lunch program. I worked with that for a while, and then at the end of the day, I ended up moving down to Charlotte, North Carolina, and just kind of ran across a group purchasing organization that happens to be headquartered down there, and that was about 18 years ago. So.
Wow.
That's kind of how this kind of landed. It wasn't really looking for it. It's kind of happened, but it made sense. All of my steps that I made in my career to that date made sense.
Yeah.
So,
building from being in the kitchen to selling to the kitchen to supporting the kitchen. It kind of parallels a little bit what I've done as well. And so it makes a lot of sense. So tell us a little bit about your role at Navigator. What do you do? I mean, we'll talk about what Navigator and what GPOs are here in a minute, but your role specifically, what do you do?
Well, I oversee everything basically that's non-sales, that support, from market basket team to distribution side, the contracting, our relationship with FoodBuy, which is our large contracting partner. I mean, we have a lot of touch points there, but I also kind of help on the internal side is keeping our connectivity with our parent company, Managed Healthcare Associates, MHA. So there's a lot of shared services that we deal with, and so I'm kind of the catalyst that kind of helps with that. But yeah, I mean, we kind of do anything. I'm not out there in the field selling, but anything that requires a support level for them, definitely engaged in with them. So
okay. So obviously, we've worked together in the past, and I know you're super knowledgeable. I mean, you said you've been in the GPO space for the last 18 years, and I wanted to dive into that for the listeners because I think a lot of times um, people who are boots on the ground, or maybe even like at the regional level, don't fully understand and appreciate everything that goes with a GPO because it's not just, hey, can I get a nickel off a case kind of situation. So kind of tell us a little bit about what GPOs are, what their benefits for members are, and kind of why people should be looking at using a GPO.
Sure, it's a great question. I mean, the whole premise of a GPO, group purchasing organization, is to aggregate spins with all of the membership that everybody can take advantage of. I mean, that's the basic tenet of it. There's different GPOs out there that do different things, that have different add-ons, different support mechanisms and whatnot. This is my third one that I've been with, worked for. So the premise of, members aggregating that spin, but what happens is the spin gets pulled back and the contract negotiations start with the manufacturers that make up that spin. And so the benefit of it is, you're not only just getting a better price, you're getting a contract that's got guardrails around it to kind of help with inflationary pressures. You're not going to take the full impact of inflation. You're going to take some of it, obviously, but
Right.
When the supply chain is off kilter or whatnot, those contracted items are going to be ones that are going to be stocked more in your distribution of, in your distributor of choice. So there's various benefits that you may not realize from just outside of just having a price. It's product availability, it's protection in down markets or up markets, depending on the scenario. It's supply chain. But then you also start getting into the benefits of the support areas where we've got, like in our organization, we've got regional account representatives that are basically they're localized account support. So those folks are going to be touching the members at a lower, more detailed level. But in addition to that, we've also got culinary support. Some GPOs do that, some don't. They do culinary training. We happen to do that. So it kind of varies with GPO, but the premise of it is there's another partner with you in your organization that you don't really pay directly anything to. They benefit off the purchases that you make through the supplier negotiations and whatnot. But that partner, such as the GPO, stands with you in looking around the corner to make sure you got your best interests at heart, right? They want you to be successful. We want you to grow and be sustainable. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, instead of having to go out and manage all the supplier relationships that an operation might encounter, you're just evaluating one or two or three based off of the GPO that you happen to use, and maybe the distributor that you use. So it provides us an opportunity to simplify your engagement with all of the resources outside of your operation that you might have to pay for. That's kind of, in a nutshell, what I would say a benefit of a GPO.
Yeah, no, I know, as having been an operator, all the things you mentioned are on the to-do list for especially someone who has been in a role like I've been at, like a VP level with a large organization. Like, how do we provide those services? How do we manage this? How do we get the best possible contracts? And so I do want to dive into a little bit about how Navigator helps manage costs for members, because you kind of touched on it a little bit with some contract management. But I know there's a lot more that you guys do and provide that can really help support your members with their costs. Today, I want to tell you about one of Trestle's senior living partners, Belter. Belter is a food service design, equipment, and supply company that has been providing expert guidance to the food and beverage industry for nearly a century. A strategic partner to the most successful food service operations in the country, Belter provides support in kitchen and bar design, equipment procurement and install, and supplies. Their team of senior living food service experts have experience across the continuum of care. From independent living to skilled nursing and CCRCs, Belter specializes in right-sizing new facilities, modernizing remodels, and providing the right food service equipment and supplies. At Belter, they are committed to creating memorable experiences for their customers and their guests. With their top-notch team and a global network of quality supplier partners, Their customer-focused approach is built on a foundation of collaboration and decades of industry experience. So thank you for considering Belter for all of your food service needs.
Sure. Yeah, so I mentioned earlier we have support teams, we've got culinary teams, but we've got a field implementation teams, especially that works directly with the locations, the operators that, with folks that actually make the purchases of the product, primarily on the food side, which makes up the majority of the spend in operation. But these field implementation folks will actually work with our optimization files. We get files that say, if you're buying this product here and it's not on contract, you probably should consider buying this other item that might be on contract, and it would have a savings for you, or it's stocked more readily, or it's a better value from a yield perspective, or what you're going to use that product for, any kind of application on the plate, whatever. But so we've got direct folks that actually help support you at the time of menu development, at the time of getting ready to create your order guides, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
that's a big part of what I think people need to understand, is we help provide that option for you.
Yeah, you used the terminology market basket earlier when we were talking, and I think a lot of people maybe don't fully understand what that is and what that means, and how, if you're a frontline, maybe like dining director, how does something like that benefit them when they're kind of making their purchase decisions, their order guide decisions, things like that? What does that service provide for them that you guys offer?
Sure. Yeah. Market baskets. A lot of times, the market basket will be used to see if we want to get a new member on board for that evaluation at the time of decision for somebody wanting to make a GPO choice. Market basket analysis can also be done if a member is using a certain distributor and they may want to consider using a different one under our program. So we would offer that option to go through there, because the markup schedules might be different. The framework for the distributor program might be a little bit more unique than what they're used to or not. Those are the two main areas. Then we get into the optimization. I'm going to use optimization and market basket interchangeably in this last example of, are you evaluating the products you want to use in your next menu cycle? That can be done. I would say a formal market basket, but there's an evaluation that can be done like from an optimization that is done in the same mentality of checking and figuring out what products make the most sense in your menu application.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned optimization, because I do think for a lot of operators that doesn't get looked at nearly as often as maybe it should be. I know when I was building menus and changing cycles, like that was part of my roadmap of how to build a menu. Was I would reach out, as a former Navigator customer, I'd reach out to my Navigator rep and say, hey, we need to do the optimization. Here's the menu, here's the order guide from the distributor, run this and let me know where my opportunities are. Because I think a lot of operators think, well, I already did that at the start. And so you're probably capturing, and my numbers may be wrong, but you capture 70, 75% maybe in that initial opportunity. But every time you make a menu change, there's always going to be some products that are either going to be new, or maybe there's a different contract on. And so I think really emphasizing that optimization piece at least once a year, if not every time you make a menu change, is such a huge piece for managing costs.
Yeah, absolutely, Aaron. And look, I didn't mention our regional account manager, our sales team, the feet on the street that actually work with our members on a weekly, daily basis. Those folks kind of get a flavor for the goals of the member, what's important to them when they start getting into those opportunities to make changes, whether it's a product or a recipe or a menu or whatever the case is. So that conversation gets started right there, because at the end of the day, these manufacturers that they're buying products for, there's always new products coming on the market, right? To your point. And sometimes, a lot of folks that are in purchasing, they'll purchase off a case cost. Well, case costs, case A may be a little bit less than a case cost of case B, but case B, you might get a lot more servings, or the yield's just better, or it's more, it has a marination to it. I'm making some of the scenarios up here, but there's some impact that you may not realize that might benefit the end result of your product, or the health benefits for your residents, and so on and so forth. So it's always important to keep a touch point within the market, and that's where the regional account reps on our team, as well as the field implementation folks, can give that insight on a regular basis to the member at any level, whether it's the dietitian, the purchasing agent, the executives, or wherever. So it's that relationship that helps spark those conversations, getting into that optimization, getting into what's the best product I should be buying for my operation.
Yeah, I know. And my experience with working with my regional managers was always really great because we had our quarterly business reviews. We would look at opportunities, and there may be times when that was a 30-minute conversation. It was like, hey, you're doing everything you can do with your contracts. Here's some new services, or here's something that's coming up. Maybe you want to consider, and they're in and out. But then there's other times where it's like, there's a lot of heavy lifting that maybe needs to be done to really maximize the partnership. And so it kind of makes me want to think, I want to talk a little bit about the benefits of working with a GPO like Navigator outside of purchasing. Like you'd mentioned a couple of things, and I think this is a good segue into, it's not just about finding that best possible price. That's really important, but there are other benefits working with a GPO.
Yeah, sure. So we've got a number of touch points, whether it's learning about legislation that might be coming down your way that might impact a certain state. There's a lot of purchasing restrictions for pork, like in the state of California and Washington. So getting ahead of that stuff that's coming down the pipe that might impact your operation, because some of these laws that are coming down, you may not be able to purchase the product that you've been used to purchasing. You might have to spend twice as much or more on a product that might be more animal welfare friendly or whatnot. We can help you understand what that impact is. We're closer to that than the regular member on the street, and we're able to have those conversations. That's one example.
Yeah.
I want to go back to getting engaged with the suppliers. I mean, at the end of the day, we've got a conference that we do once a year, that we get all the suppliers that are impacting our members together, and getting to foster that engagement, foster the product cuttings, getting the peace of mind that I'm confident in what I'm purchasing because I've seen it, I've tasted it, I've had residents sample it, that kind of thing, and I happen to know the chef that represents that manufacturer. I've met him or her before. I mean, it's a relationship piece that we help foster on your behalf, because whoever you are in your operations, I mean, you're always looking for extra time to do these things, right? So we help do that for you, and we're pretty good at it. I mean,
and I think about, I typically with the consulting I do with Trestle, we focus on these smaller operators, right? The ones that don't have the corporate support or a big corporate team. And so I look at a GPO like Navigator as a huge resource for those operators, with things like the Culinary Academy that you kind of briefly mentioned. It's great for frontline staff. You have menu tools that are available to customers that let them, they don't have to necessarily go out and find some big software. They can work with you guys and have those contracts tied in. And so I think there's a lot of that kind of consultative approach to how you guys do things that's really helpful, especially for a small operator. And so I'm curious for you to kind of talk a little bit about why you guys take that consultative approach, like I mentioned, versus, just kind of, here's what we have and you tell us what you want us to do. And what have you found benefits your work with members that way?
Well, our mission statement for our organization going forward is helping people age with grace. And at the end of the day, what that means is being able to provide the best service offerings and opportunities for folks at the operation level to support their residents. So at the end of the day, the reason we do the consultative piece, we've this is a relationship business in my mind, right? You've got to understand the people you're supporting. And if we have a culture like that starts that way, I think good things happen. So we don't start with the dollars. We don't start with, let's make sure everybody's buying everything that we have and just force feeding. That's not our approach. Our approach is we want the long-term relationships with our members and with our business partners that we work with outside of our organization.
Yeah, I've always been comfortable in working with anybody within the Navigator group, just because of that, right? It's always what's the win-win for all of us
Yeah.
because, you know, you can get lost in the contract reviews. You can get lost in all of that. I know I personally have on my end, but I've always appreciated being able to, sit down and then kind of look at it as how do we come to the best possible solution for all of us using the resources that you have, the resources that I have. Because again, like you said, how do we that end customer is the resident, and how do we help them be the most comfortable and have the most successful experience in the communities that we're operating. So,
Absolutely. I mean, look, when I went to culinary school, when I first interviewed to go into culinary school, I mean, they're looking for certain personalities and personalities that like to help and please people, right?
yeah,
So I like to think that a lot of the folks in our organization are wired that way. I think a lot of them are. I know a lot of them are. We've got a lot of tenure on this team, so we got a lot of folks, especially on the member-facing side, that have a couple decades worth of experience in this space, and they know food. They know these relationships with all these distributors. They have deep relationships with anybody that might touch the member from a product or a service offering. I just want to underscore that because I think that's kind of what brings value from a GPO standpoint to an operator that may not be really realized or understood. So,
Navigator is the largest full-service GPO that exclusively focuses on the senior living community. And what that means is we provide products and services that help our members provide a great environment for their residents, such as like MRO, hospitality equipment, food, business products, as well as technology solutions. We actually surround our members with a level of support unmatched in the industry.
yeah, it's interesting you say that because there's definitely you see those out there that are pushing well, we can save you X amount, or we can we
yeah,
can we can get that money on the contract for you. But you've got to look at that a little more holistically. And what is the overall like service I'm getting from my partner that's a GPO with costs with that. But how can I also like with the training we talked about, or with software, or with other services? How do those things benefit? Because there's cost savings I think operators can find and see in just working with you in those areas that maybe they wouldn't get with working with other GPOs.
yeah. So we offer. I mean, there's services out there. We offer a peer-to-pay platform for members that want to go down that route. Basically, you have all the purchasing in one place. It manages the invoices. It manages everything from the purchase to the payment of that invoice. And it keeps things organized. It keeps things streamlined. You can have multiple operators or multiple locations within your umbrella operating, all swimming in the same, in the same direction. And
Yeah.
that's kind of the goal. There's a lot of clients, operators we have as members that basically they have a lot of locations and all the locations are doing their own thing. And that
Yes.
is problematic for a number of reasons, for consistency, for availability of product, for if you aggregate down and get to a more streamlined list of products, you can probably save yourself some money. And we have tools and areas that support systems that can help you manage that within your locations.
Yeah.
That's
That's
a
an
critical piece.
It is. And it's a great point too, right? Because I do think there's this ongoing battle as an operator to, well, how do I let them have local freedom to meet their resident needs? But as a corporate director, how do I help manage costs as an umbrella, right? And that was always my struggle. And what I found was when I would sit down and do the contract review, the optimization, the services, we would go in with this mindset of, I got to have a local control, but how do I give them the resources? And even with just specifying, an A, B, and C product in your optimization or your contracts, that can make a huge difference. Maybe you don't get the full brunt of savings, but you can get a huge majority of it, and you still are able to keep your local operators happy because they have a little bit more flexibility in being able to manage what they do.
Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. There's, me, my background as a chef. I like to be able to do things that I like, the way I like to do things, but
Yep.
there's a balance, right? I mean, the more and more we get into this environment of supply chain issues and inflation, the more and more it's that much more important for folks to be able to put some restrictions around your operation where it makes sense.
Yeah.
Because, operating in a way where anybody buys everything they want, 10 years ago was different than now. Now it really come back and bite you if you're not careful. So the operators we find that have more control over their operations in general, not on everything, but say 80%, 90%, those are the ones that tend to be more stable or tend to have more success in the long run with managing their spends and managing the outcome of that spend for their patients. So
you mentioned guardrails earlier in our conversation, and I think that's exactly the right way to describe it, right? You as the GPO are able to help the operator define those guardrails, build the program in between the guardrails, so that way everybody can be successful in the long run. So as we kind of wrap up here today, Brian, I'm curious if you were to give our listeners like one big takeaway or one piece of advice when they think about working with Navigator or a GPO like Navigator, what would that one big takeaway be?
Yeah, it's a great question, Aaron. I would say the one thing that I always come back to in my mind is you gotta, as an operator, you gotta find a way to trust somebody, right? I mean, it's always like, the affirmation out there is like, I can always do it better myself, and maybe you can, but at the end of the day, nobody in operations, from my experience being there and seeing all the members we have, has the time allotted to be able to manage all the different relationships, the different contact points or whatnot. So, from a GPO standpoint, and granted, I'm a little biased, but I've been working for 3 of them over my career, and so I think there's value and benefit in it. But find somebody that you can trust, because if that's the case, and do your, evaluate your GPO every 2 or 3 years. If you do it that way, you're evaluating your whole program at once, and the benefit for that is, you're not going to have to manage all these relationships, but you hold your GPO to account on the pricing and the value that you think it's bringing, and make them prove it to you. We're fine with that. We do that all day long. But, back to the point in the question, if you find somebody, a couple of partners out there, whether in the distribution space as well as the GPO space, that you trust, that you can check and challenge and whatnot at the right level, I mean, you're going to be much better off. You can sleep better at night. And I think, as an operation, you're going to be well positioned to go into the next set of challenges that might be coming down on the calendar. So that's my 2 cents. Find somebody to trust.
Yeah. Great advice. Yep. So, Brian, tell us how our listeners can learn more about Navigator, the services you offer, and even how maybe if they want to, how they can schedule a meeting with a regional account manager.
Yeah, sure. I'm not sure if you have the information down below the screen here or not, but Navigator GPO, so it's Navigator. I think it's Navigator.com or NavigatorGPO.com. But you can go online and get some information. They can reach out to me. I think my contact information will hopefully be up there. But as far as reaching out, there's also, we can get you in touch with any of our account reps or directors out in the field to have an initial conversation. You go down that route. So the best way, Aaron, for you to get the contact info out there would be good.
Perfect. Well, we'll definitely be sure to share all that information for the listeners in the show notes. So, well, Brian, thanks so much for joining me today and kind of laying the groundwork of why a GPO partner like Navigator is so important to our industry. So thanks for joining me today on Tips from Trestle.
Oh, thanks for having me. Great to see you, Aaron. Take care.
So there you have it, another one in the books. Thanks again, everybody, for listening. Please follow, like, and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts, and follow us on Twitter at Tips from Trestle. You can also learn more about the work I do by following me on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and even TikTok. And be sure to check out Trestle Hospitality Concepts at www.trestlehospitalityconcepts.com. I'm your host, Aaron Fish, and this has been another episode of Tips from Trestle.